Heidi hey, Heidi ho, Heidi he, and Heidi. So, I tell you, kids, I used to be back in springtime, especially. I could sleep like 4 hours and I'm done. 4.5, you know. Somebody planted me with the sleep cycle thing, and I don't know that it's not necessarily true, but I always kind of felt like if I got 4.5 hours, or I got 6, or I got 7.5. But see, the 7.5 though just kind of mushes into that 8. Who knows if that 8, that extra half hour is there just to bog you back into a different sleep cycle, Anyhow, I haven't been staying up all hours. Been zonking out by midnight most of the time, I think. And I'm telling you, my sleep cycle has just extended. I mean, I'll wake up, I'll see the sun or whatever. I'm sure there's plenty of sleep counselors would tell me, well, you got too much light. You're sleeping in this chair half the time. Your bed's that kind of blah blah blah. I'm telling you, kids, it's certainly there's going to be something to the slowing down of cell replication, which is what aging kind of equates to on a scientific level, on a cellular level. But there's just so much in terms of motivation. I don't know how many of you kids just don't feel like getting up through the week whenever you've got school and during school session and whatnot. But on a Saturday or whatever, you're wide awake, bright and early. Maybe maybe you have to stay quiet, or maybe you want to ride to this place or whatever, and so you're kind of bummed that your parents are sleeping in, doing what they most want to do on their day off. Anyhow, I don't know that these things are necessarily approachable by us as individuals for our own purposes, which is ironic and kind of sad considering how much we agree on things we dislike. Maybe things will change as per a larger global shift or national shift or whatever, and maybe you'll pick up more advantage as a species piece, and that's good. We wouldn't want to argue with that, and I don't have any reason to expect that that's coming. I don't know. But I guess what we would want to iterate or sort of elucidate is that if things are given to you you know, in that large overall heading, under that large overall heading, there's probably something you're missing out on. I think no matter what, so long as individual people are forced into a situation where they have to just concede that this is part of life, getting up early or whatever, being forced into more necessity to produce within a set of circumstances where you covered half the freaking thing with pavement already. You got the sky is full of carcinogens and stuff, to put it in an extreme light. I think no matter what, until the individual species pieces are able to, rather than say, agree that this is life, start embracing and start engaging, whether or not it's anything you can do about, whether or not you're going to start brushing with a suggestion to parts of the global community that maybe an aspect of our mammal existence, kind of the reason, as we covered a couple days ago, that you're here to replicate, is something that has to be toned and moderated by us, for us, then it's difficult because you get a lot of people that are already in this bogged down situation as compared to a more idealistic free situation. And what's there for them to look forward to but bearing another life into this situation, you know? And for them, that terminology wouldn't jive real well. You know, they're gonna have a child, and that's gonna be a really big deal for them. Obviously, it's going to fulfill their function as a replicator. So just some things to think about. We had some I had some dreams. There were a couple things involved. I was back in a situation with a girlfriend where I was involved in an activity which happened to be drugs that she wasn't cool with. And I don't know what it was about my personality or anything that might have been different whenever I was on those drugs, but it became a thing where I wasn't supposed to be doing this according to her, so I'd have to always hide it. And then I'd have times by myself, and I'd have her returning, and I'd have to try and hide it and stuff, you know. There was just that feeling. I don't necessarily know exactly how that played into it. But I know there was another part where there was like this big field. There was a little bit of tree over here, a little bit of tree over here, and then just kind of open field though. There were some trees around, not real thick jungle or anything. But I was of the impression it was a 22. And I was just shooting. I don't know what I was shooting initially. I was shooting at the trees or something, probably. I don't know. I lost most of that dream, but I do remember there were birds coming in, and you know how it is with those BB guns, guys. Maybe girls, I don't know. You can only shoot cans so long before things that move start to become enticing targets. And I don't recall whether I shot any. I think I shot at a couple. I think I remember blasting off at one in the sky and thinking there's no way I'd hit it anyways, you know. But then I remember a bunch of the birds started to come into some of these trees that were around me. And I don't think I shot at any, but I remember one coming down, and it was like this loon thing. It had this big crown and had sort of personable eye, you know, big eyes, and it got close enough I could see it. And of course, at that point, I didn't want to shoot at the birds anymore. I don't know. I think that kind of says some sort of obvious things about our distance from other living beings, other things that don't really deserve to get hurt or whatever, you know. And how that can shift a little bit whenever they become more close and personal. You relate to them as something more than just objects in the distance for you to shoot at with your 22. I don't know. But we've been kind of logging dreams a little bit here and there, and that's one I remember. So, anyhow, we've caught up our calls. Like I said, I need to run back over to where I was last night as dark was falling and make sure I've got it trimmed up good. That guy's been he's, you know, I'm kind of his go-to guy, I guess, with this stuff, and he's been gracious enough to sort of trust me with the upkeep of his property there. He's trying to sell, and then his place outside of town. So anyways, we got to run over there and make sure we've got it trimmed up good, and then I guess we'll run over to Oklahoma where we were the other day and had kind of it took longer than we would have anticipated, but I think we didn't dick around or anything. We were fairly thorough in our approach and our execution. But we've got to get over there. They're due for another mow anyhow, and we called around and found out where to take tires and stuff. It's going to be a lot less expensive than I thought. See, I was thinking it was like $10 a tire or something, but there's a place over in the neighboring town that takes them for significantly less. So I'm gonna get that taken care of, and then maybe hang some flyers, maybe get some calls. I don't know. Need to hang some flyers anyways, really. But that's where we're at today on How's This Mini. Taking in a couple YouTubes here, getting probably having attempts made at misdirection. I don't know. Like I say, we stopped watching local TV just because there's too much kind of, well, I don't fully understand it, but from where I'm at it, I perceived it as being negative feedback, or in other cases just sort of jump out and get your attention-y type stuff, you know. And it's like, I'm not addressing you people directly, and I don't really need the flack, so we just stopped watching them, you know. Like I said, we're sort of exercising that which we would suggest in terms of not getting sucked into my words with your perception or whatever, and thinking it's all about you or whatever. Well, it doesn't help for me to be, you know, kind of doing the same thing, perhaps. We don't know. But we just quit watching it. However, as I made mention, and as has remained sort of the case, I know there's a million different tubes out there, different things to watch on YouTube. I need to maybe find a different cycle, but you know, I don't find entertainment entertaining anymore. I do find things which are sort of paralleling or bridging our current situations, our longer running situations. You know, there's biblical stuff and omissions from the Bible, and then there's all this CERN stuff. And basically, though, what I want to say, kids, is that YouTube is not what it might seem initially. I think in a lot of cases, you've got people with channels that are presenting information to you as though they don't know, or well, to put it bluntly, I think there's, you know, like government operatives are making these releases of information in order to control and direct your perception a little bit. I don't know exactly how to describe it, but don't be too naive whenever you go a tubing and think that this is all sort of untapped information, or this is you discovering along with the presenters that which they are finding or whatever. There's every possibility that you're being misdirected for whatever freaking reason. I know it's difficult from here to I'm just kind of simplistic about shit, and I think that comes through a lot. Where, like I say, if there's some weird social dynamic and I just try to address it, it blows up into something else. You know, I'm this crazy person, or I don't know. It would just seem to be a lot simpler, but again, I'm not imbued with, I don't have a real strong core which is built up around a dogma or something. I'm sure I've got my own, not my own, but you know, something which you don't relate to religion across the board, any particular religion across the board or whatever. I'm sure I've got my own rigid holdings or whatever. But in terms of disseminating information to large swaths of the public, Well, if nothing else, we've spent a couple few years just dogging our very freaking life. So we're a little bit accustomed, we're a little bit uh, desensitized to something which would tell an entire town, you shouldn't even really kind of be here. I mean, in terms of necessity and all the problems that are going to come to be this day, what the heck are you even doing here? You're just kind of creating jobs, you're opening new businesses and stuff. Whenever this place was sitting here of its by itself with all these vines that climb up every tree and fence that doesn't get dick with for a year, this was all just a forest. Like my neighbor said, 120 years ago, this was one great big forest. Nobody was here, and somehow you weren't suffering as a result of that. Well, how? You weren't here. Well, anyhow, that simplicity, that simplistic approach to disseminating information, it would cross a lot of people's present existence. And I think that's a lot of why, it's part of why things get washed in weird misdirection and stuff in terms of these tubes or what, the news itself. And unfortunately, I think there's also an aspect where people depend on people. In some instances, tiers of people depend on other tiers of people being within a certain level of understanding or not having a certain level of understanding, or if they do understand a little bit, beyond being shot down, being knocked back into their little tier, because that's the nature of this overtime species. So anyhow, just some things to think about here on How's This Many. Damn, we did 17 minutes today.